Hi, my name is Whyte. We're here at Oshkosh 2024, and this is a Royal Danish Air Force de Havilland DHC-1 Chipmunk. This is P126, which was her original markings when it was in the Danish Air Force. The Chipmunk was built as a primary trainer, and it was used by pretty much all of the NATO countries, any of the allied countries that weren't the U.S. We didn't fly them because we had the T-34, but it was used by the Canadians and the English and the Egyptians and the Danish. Like there was like 50 countries operated them. And this particular airplane was built in 1950. The Chippies were operational from 1948. The Royal Air Force still operates two because they use them to prepare the pilots for the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight to transition into the Spitfire. The adage with the Battle of Britain guys that says if you can fly a Chipmunk from the rear seat, you're ready to fly the Spitfire. I've never flown a Spitfire, so I don't know if that's true or not. But we'll give you a tour of the airplane. It's an aluminum fuselage, all welded monocoque construction, aluminum wing with fabric covered rear after the main spar, fabric covered control surfaces, wing fuel tanks. We do the pre-flight. We go through and just check the general condition. This airplane is unique in that it's never been restored from Danish military service. It is as it was. I kind of call it a daily driver or a survivor. We've touched up the paint and things, but the fabric was put on by the Danish Air Force in 1977, and then they went and surplused it. So it's a very, very, I want to say, authentic airplane, even though it's probably not the cleanest one you've ever seen. The wingtips are metal. One of the unique features of the airplane, it has nav lights that are, they're actually boat lights. We jokingly say that some of the parts of the airplane are made of unobtainium. They're very hard to find. This particular airplane, the fixtures are original, but I've refit them with LED lights for reliability. There's a few things that we've done to increase the reliability of the airplane. Underneath here is the pitot tube, and it's a steel pitot mast, and this is brass. The probe itself. We've got the tie-down rings, and one of the things that's unique about when you bring an airplane to Oshkosh, they give you a zip tie, and each owner keeps the zip ties from every year they had it. So when I bought the airplane, the previous owner went and cut all of his zip ties off, and he said, you got to start your own collection. And so as you wander around the flight line at Oshkosh, a lot of us keep our zip ties on there from year to year, and so that's something that you'll see. Come over to the main landing gear. The landing gear is original, but this particular airplane has been refit with 600x6 Cleveland wheels and brakes because they're easier to obtain in the U.S., better braking authority, and the tires are much cheaper than the original English ones. So another one of the mods that we've done to increase the reliability and safety of the airplane. Same thing, we come up to the engine compartment here. It's a de Havilland Gypsy Major 4-cylinder inline engine, and this engine was developed, it was half of a World War I Renault V8, and the original Gypsy was an upright inline engine, and then later on they converted it to the inverted inline, and a lot of people think it's a Ranger because that's what is more common in the US, but it's a de Havilland Gypsy Major engine. This particular airplane, and a lot of them here, have been refit with slick magnetos. Again, just to increase the reliability of it.
Yeah, point out anything here.
So this system, this is the fuel priming system. So to prime the engine, we pull this D-ring, and then we have a wobble pump here. And the cowling is designed, it has openings in the cowling that you can sneak your fingers through, but my personal preference is to open the cowl, pull the pin so that you can kind of see and feel everything and watch it as it happens. These are the valve covers down here, and the oil system, because it is an inverted engine, these are they have an individual reservoir in them with about a pint of oil in each, and the valves just sit there and splash around like in a little kiddie pool of their own oil. It's not the ship's oil system. Each one has its own, so as part of our inspection every 25 hours we drop those and make sure that there's still the proper amount of oil in them. The British love brass, so they have data plates on everything that are brass. It's a fairly reed propeller, and it's really unique. If we take the spinner off, they're stamped metal propellers. So when you see a normal metal prop, the hub is very thick, and you have the blades. The hub on this propeller is exactly the same thickness as the blade. So they take a flat piece of steel and then twist it. And so it's the only one that I've ever seen like that. And they're very, very unique to the Chipmunk. And you'll notice the blades are going the wrong way because the engine, quote, runs backwards to a normal American engine.
Okay, yeah, I'll be out of here on Thursday probably.
Come around on this side. Here's the carburetor, and one of the things that we check, actually this is stuck here, is we check just for that. This is the arm. When we pull that D-ring on the other side, we want to make sure that that doesn't stick, and then you check to make sure that the float comes back up. That's a normal pre-flight item, but you can see the all of the push rods and things for the engine. It kind of reminds me more of a tractor technology than that. Here's the data plate. If we look, there's 7 Chipmunks here at Oshkosh, and I think we have 7 different data plates because there were so many blocks. They were building these engines like the end of the earth was coming, and this is an older style one with the original brass data plate. There are several different ones we can take a look at. We talked about the slick magnetos. This airplane's been refit, and it's got a spin-on oil filter, again geared towards increasing the reliability of the airplane. At the brass, this is the oil. Oil dipstick, allowing us to check the oil. We call it the Chipmunk rule of thumb. I need to add a little bit of oil because from the full mark you want to have about 1 thumb width of oil is kind of the normal level that we look for. The Danish Air Force installed a cockpit heater system that is about as effective as the heater system in a Piper Cub. You don't want to fly it in Alaska in the winter, it's a little bit chilly. But the Danes were the only Air Force that operated Chipmunks on skis. And so their training bases were all grass fields, and so they operated them on skis. And we have a set of skis for the airplane, we just don't have the hardware for it. So one of these years we're going to bring it up here and we'll display it on skis for a couple of days just to get people wondering how we got it here. All right, so coming from the engine compartment over to the side of the fuselage, we have a grounding port for fueling. Originally, the fire extinguisher is mounted right behind this panel. Fuel tanks are in the wings, 9 imperial gallons. The fuel gauges are in the wings, and of course, the British and their love of brass have brass fuel caps. The fuel tank vent here. We got on the leading edge of the fuel tank is a stall strip. Just allows the brake to happen inboard, so you have aileron control, and so it's a very, very docile airplane. The Chipmunks have been called like the Stradivarius of control harmony. They're just absolutely perfectly balanced. They're very, very light on the controls. If you feel the controls on the ground, in flight they don't get any heavier. You just fly it with 2 fingers and it just goes wherever you want it to. It's just a wonderful flying airplane. Come down here, we've got our fuel drains, 1 on each side, and those are just like you have on any other general aviation aircraft for testing the fuel. The one unique feature on this airplane, I don't know if you can come down here and see it, is we still have the Morse code light installed in the airplane, and there's a switch in the cockpit, and so they could fly over and flick this switch with Morse code and in the event of a radio failure. And those have been removed from a lot of airplanes because it's kind of excess weight in that, so it's kind of cool that we still have that installed in the airplane. Another tie-down ring out here. This is another Chipmunkism. The comm antenna is out on the right wing, and the other Chipmunks have moved them around and found out that the reception is better out here. So it's something to do with the ground plane of the airplane. So this is a modern antenna that's been installed. The original one was just a straight wire that came down. So that's one of our winter projects, is to change the antenna out to the original one, but it works great. So the insignia on the airplane, as we talked about, it has been mistaken for all kinds of crazy things. We just did an air show and someone thought it was a Japanese Val. I've been called a Zero, a Hurricane, a Spitfire, a PT-19. We get called all kinds of things. So the markings throw people off because you don't see a lot of Danish airplanes in North America. They exported 3 of them to North America, and this is the only one that's still in its Danish uniform. In fact, the airplane that's behind us is actually an ex-Danish Air Force airplane, and that's P-124. but it's out of uniform. It's dressed as a Canadian airplane. Come around here, again the nav lights. In the light on the green lens, you can see our new LEDs that we installed in there. When we come around here, there's a trim tab on the aileron, and this is a fixed trim tab, and you don't mess with it. You get the airplane balanced. This particular airplane is almost no trim in it whatsoever, which is really unusual. If you go through and look at the other 6 airplanes that are here, they all have different amounts of trim bent into it, and that's just the airplanes were all hand built, and that's how it is. This one is rigged absolutely beautifully. Come around here to the flaps. There's a wing walk on both sides of the airplane, but generally we get in on the other side only because the handle for the canopy is over there. So you could get in either way. All the markings are in Danish. Behind here, I'll get it on the other side, but there's a battery compartment on each side. The airplane has 2 batteries, and the previous owner of the airplane upgraded the battery system from the old lead acid batteries, so it has the EarthX lithium ion in it now, which helps us out because it's a much lighter battery system. So those are installed back there. We've got panels back here for inspecting the rear fuselage, and we've made duplicate panels of those, and we use them at air shows. We mount GoPros on it, and so we call them the waist gun mounts, because like in the B-17, the waist guns were right about here, and so when we shoot the videos at different air shows, like we did one last year of us flying over Oshkosh, we just mount the GoPros right there. This opening here is there's an aluminum tube that runs through the fuselage, and you can see there's a lot of structure with the rivets behind it, and that's used in typical high-tech fashion. We stick a broom handle in there, and that's how we use to move the airplane around on the ground. Use a broom handle for a tow bar, and that hole is perfectly calibrated for a typical broom, so it works out well. The airplane has spin strakes on it. Originally it was not designed with anti-spin strakes, and the airplane, that one does not have it. You can see on the airplane next to us, that's pre-spin strakes. They were actually installed and later removed, but the spin strakes were put on after an accident, and they couldn't fit, so they had to install those, and they're kind of a mix of technology, aluminum sheet metal with wood inserts. So one of the few plywood parts on the airplane. Got the Danish flag, all of its Danish insignia. I had to use Google Translate to figure out what it is, because my grandfather was Danish, but I don't speak any of the language. The rudder is designed as an homage to the de Havilland Mosquito. Of course, the airplane was designed by de Havilland, and the original designer of the airplane came from Poland, and he got to England, and they put him into service, and they sent him to Canada and to set up mosquito production for World War II. And when the war ended, they said, hey, you guys got to come up with a new product to sell if you want to keep your jobs, because we're not building mosquitoes anymore. And he had the plans for what became the DHC-1, which is de Havilland Canada -1, the Chipmunk. And the airplane has it was one of the arguments, or the priorities that they had, was to use existing parts. So the fuel caps, the oil caps, all of those things came off of tiger moths, mosquitoes, the other airplanes that they were building. And the rudder shape is an homage to the mosquito. The rear nav light on this airplane has been replaced. It's got a UV avionics tail beacon. One of the things, we fly the airplane all over the country for air shows and things, and so to get ADS-B, we've added that. One of the reasons we put that one on there is I've been really trying to keep the airplane as original as possible and didn't want to cut any new holes if we didn't have to. The rudder is fabric covered, and you can see it's really light. All of the control surfaces are super light and very well balanced. If you touch the control stick in the cockpit, it's really light, and it doesn't get any heavier in flight. It's just a marvelous flying airplane. Come around this side. One of the things we learned about the airplane is that the English use a different alloy of aluminum than Americans, and when you get a crack in an American airplane, the crack kind of propagates straight, and it's a metallurgy thing. In an English airplane, they kind of go in a curve, and so we developed a crack and had to go in there and double it up. But one of the airplanes, the elevator skin was damaged, and you could like peel it back, so it's a very different structure. The airplane is very strong, +6, -3 Gs. It's more aerobatic than I am, because -3 doesn't sound like much fun at all. The tail wheel on this airplane, let me move some stuff out of the way so we can see this better. So we use the original tail wheel fork, but it's been refitted with a Scott tail wheel because the original tires and tubes for the thing, they were a little bit wider, but the tires and tubes are also made out of unobtainium and have become really, really expensive. And so for reliability, the airplane's been replaced with a Scott tail wheel. Works well. So we come back up here, and let me slide this forward. And here's our battery compartment. And 2 screws, pop those off, and we got 2 batteries inside there. The canopy, there's kind of 2 versions of the Chipmunk. There's the English and the Canadian version, and the English Chipmunks have what we call it the birdcage canopy. The Canadian aircraft are the ones that are the bubble canopy, like if you see Nathan Hammond's Super Chipmunk, that has a Canadian bubble. And so that's kind of the easiest way to tell you between an English and a Canadian version. The Portuguese also built them under license, and they have the quote birdcage canopy as well. To open it, you have the latch up here, and it slides back. So now we're coming up to the cockpit. This is the rear cockpit, which when it was in military service was the instructor's cockpit. And you can kind of see the instructor's stick. Push talk switch, you have the fuel on off, there's redundant front and rear, the instructor's brake handle, over here is the pitch trim, throttle quadrant, the throttle's on the outside, the mixture is here, and the mixture is backwards from a American airplane, what we're normally used to. So when it's all the way aft, that's full rich, and all the way forward is lean. So that's something different from as an American pilot when you check out into it. Instructor has magneto switches up here, some controls for the lighting. The instrument panels are shock mounted. This particular airplane has most of the original instruments still in it. Everything working. Over on the right hand side of the cockpit is the flap handle. And we come over there is the plug-in for the rear seat headsets. We wear parachutes mainly because I'm going to pull the parachute out and let you see the bucket seat. So there's seat parachutes, and so the seat bottoms, you need some kind of a cushion or a parachute, and so the airplane was designed to be flown with parachutes, so we use those. The Achilles heel of having a Chipmunk and taking it to air shows is that the baggage compartment is not much of a baggage compartment. It's a little bit bigger than 2 shoe boxes, but we keep rags and I used to take oil, and I keep, a friend of mine developed this very high-tech tool. It's a Chipmunk fuel cap wrench, because line guys would crank on them, and because they're made out of brass, to protect them, we came up with the Chipmunk fuel tool. And we keep our fuel strainer in there, some rags, and then if you have an old English airplane, you have to use the appropriate polish to keep it clean. Oh, and then, of course, as an airshow airplane, you have to have GoPro mounts everywhere. I'm going to bring these in. All right, so this is the front cockpit of the airplane. In a stock Chipmunk, you solo from the front seat, so you have the radios are in the front. In the Super Chipmunks, like Nathan Hammond flies in the air shows, you solo it from the rear seat. So all of the Chipmunks have a slightly different radio configuration. This particular airplane, the radio stack is mounted here, and then the original airplanes, down here is where they had a P11 type compass, and I'll show you one of the other airplanes. It looks like it should be on a cruise ship or a Royal Navy yacht. It's a big flat compass that looks like it would be more at home on the bridge of the Titanic than in an airplane. Up here we've got, we'll start on this side, we have our switch panel. Nav lights are always left on because of the ADS-B panel lights. The ident button. Over here is the emergency light, and that's the light down on the wing that we talked about earlier, that we can send Morse code if you're any good at that. Our trim, this is a modern We added a battery and avionics master switch to the airplane. That was not original 1950. The original master switch is down here, and it's ground flight. So depending on where you are intending to go, if it's on the ground, it's off, and flight, it's back on. This is a battery monitor panel. When they put the EarthX batteries in, they installed those. The airplane's magneto switches are up here. Down is off, up is on. One of the unique things about the Chippy is it has a tachometer that's like a clock. It has, if you can kind of see that, there's the hundreds needle and the 1,000 RPM needle. And so the tach goes all the way around, and a lot of new Chipmunk pilots get confused if you're flying at 2,200 RPM and 2,200 feet, because it's right next to the altimeter. It takes a little bit of getting used to. The airspeed reads in knots. One of the things that we noticed that was different about the Danish airplanes versus the English versions, the Danes put in cageable gyros and the RAF airplanes didn't. So if we go do aerobatics, we can cage the gyros and keep them from tumbling. Vertical speed is the only instrument in the front that is not original. That's a modern replacement. And then oil temperature, oil pressure. Behind this panel over here is the starter. And if you look at the placard on it, it says fire, hold down, flap, pull ring. So now it has a modern switch in it because it's an electric start. Originally, when the airplane was built, it had a cartridge starter in it. None of them are running cartridge starters anymore, but I've seen a couple come up for sale like on eBay, and like it'd be kind of fun to have one just to demonstrate that thing. We come back down here, the headset jacks. Right below the headset jacks is this little lever here, and this moves back and turns. That's your carburetor heat control. So that's, as a new Chipmunk pilot, that's among the hardest things to figure out, is how the carb heat works in the front cockpit, because it's kind of hidden up underneath there. So you got to look for that. We've got our flap handle down here. It's got 3 positions of flaps: up, half, and full. And then the brake over here. It's got a very unusual braking system. As you can see down there, it has rudder bars instead of a pedal system, and a handbrake, and it works kind of like an L-39 or the Spitfire did the same thing, and they all actuated the brakes slightly differently. Some of them used the toggle switches on the stick. This particular airplane, you pull the handle, and if the rudder bar is neutral, you pull the handle, you get both brakes. If you are depress the bar like you would push the pedal, and you pull that handle, you get differential braking. It sounds complicated, and the first 100 yards you taxi the airplane, it feels really weird, but it actually becomes really intuitive and almost second nature. Because when you're using the rudder bar and you add the brake, it just sort of becomes a natural, and it seems weird and unnecessarily complex, but it works really, really well. So we saw these wrinkles, and they're very isolated in here. For the longest time, we thought it was from a hard landing, and then one of the Danish instructors came up to us at a show, and he said, no, it was from the guys would climb up on the wing and they'd swing the parachutes, and the parachutes would bang in and out of it. So I said, oh, well, that's why when you climb up. And so we tried it in the hangar one day. I put the parachute over my shoulder and I swung it, and it took the paint off right there. So we only did that once. So that's the Chipmunk. We'll take a look at some of the other airplanes, and I'll show you some of the other differences between a Danish airplane and an English airplane.
Cool.
All right.
Let's keep rolling. Show them all the chippies here.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool. This year at Oshkosh, we've got 7 of them. Let's see, I can't remember. So this airplane, WP-833, flew around the world with a sister ship. They flew 2 of them with a Brit-Normand Islander as a chase plane, and they flew it around the world. I can't imagine that. There's a book about it, but that, like, what an adventure. And it's been signed by its original crew. Its sister ship that also flew around the world is in the RAF Museum in Hendon, England. So this is different from the Danish airplanes. The batteries on mine, the covers are up here, and on the late RAF airplanes, they were down here, and it opens up, and the battery slides out on a tray. Let's see. We can show All right, sounds good, yeah. So this is the cockpit of WP-833, and there's some differences. This airplane was configured for the round-the-world flight, so it has a thicker avionics stack. They mounted a GPS up on the glare shield. This red handle you see, there's one here, and there's another one down in the floorboard, and that's the control lock when the airplane's parked on display. And I have an original English control lock, but it doesn't fit in my airplane because the center section down here is different on the Danish airplanes. It's a little bit narrower, and it doesn't have these half circles that cover the hinges, and so where the Danish airplanes have the control lock attached is just forward of the fuel shutoff valve. So it's slightly different, but it's a very clever design. This holds onto the stick and then attaches on either side of the fuselage and becomes a very effective gust lock for windy conditions. You can see there, that was where the original fire extinguisher mount is. I'm working on getting one reinstalled in my airplane. And the English airplanes have a chart case over there that the Danish didn't put in. Hello, how are you? I think he's down at Steven's airplane. He was just here, like a few minutes ago. We'll go over and look at WG-430 because that airplane still has the original P11 compasses in it. And we'll show you those because, like I said, they look like they should be on a boat. So there's the original P11 compass. Let's slide this in the back. So there's the P11 compass, and they had to mount it, and it's on a mount here in the compass, and it's shock mounted. And it's very accurate, but you have to be in level flight in smooth air for it to be accurate. So I think you could, you know, get a compass heading twice a day or something like that. You notice the gyros are different. English airplane, so they have the uncageable gyros. Same altimeters, same tachometers. One thing that's unique about this particular airplane, this is WG-430, is you look on the side of the airplane, there's some artwork on it, and that's original RAF nose art, and that is like absolutely original. It's hand painted, it's kind of fragile, and it has a very un-English elephant on it, and so I said, why would they have an elephant on it? And it says one AEF, which is the Air Experience Flight, and at the base that this aircraft was stationed at, when they did the Air Experience flights for the RAF cadets, which is kind of like what we would call like Young Eagle flights today, they would take off from the base and fly to the zoo and come back, and so the joke was their squadron, all they did was fly to the elephants and back, and so they became the Flying Elephant Squadron, and the airplane has the elephant back on there. And if you look very carefully at that, you can see the original brush strokes from the crew chief that painted it on there. This one also has one other cool feature I want to show you. So the RAF airplanes, they have the fabric covered wing, and they have a first aid kit that's stored inside the wing between, you see there's a rib bay here and a rib here, and the first aid kit is there, and there's a little window that you can see it, and there's a strap that if you had an accident and needed to get at the first aid kit, you could take this up and tear through the fabric and get at the first aid kit.
That is too cool.
So that's Chipmunk. And what else I can tell you? This airplane has the original tailwheel, tube and so you can see it's a slightly wider tailwheel than what was on 126. And this airplane has also never been restored, so it is exactly as it was surplused from the Royal Air Force. So it's got some patina here and there, and the original artwork's still on it. Well, thanks for watching, and keep supporting the channel. And if you see a chipmunk out, come on out and say hello.